Hi, Pat.
Hi, thanks. Finally, I
Yes.
apologize yet again for my
No
my
worries.
missed
Not at
things.
all.
I just feel like I've been running too hard and not attending to things well enough. So thank you very much. I did take one quick glance at the folder and saw that you had a comment in there. It looked like basically a question about whether that would be the El Limon team, a piece about their work. What I would say is we can check and see how much they want to play, but Victor has moved to Denver, but of course in pandemic we're all virtual anyway.
Yeah.
And I think their team, at least a major part of them, they've closed out their Nicaraguan project and they're applying this afternoon. I think they're applying for a new WASH project in Ecuador.
Okay.
And working with a long-standing NGO that is partnering with EWB USA for, I don't know, maybe they've opened a country office there, but they can certainly do remote implementation. I just glanced at it, and I think I can't say the name of it, but I think I've heard about this NGO for years as being a partner before it was formalized with a country office with EWB teams working in Ecuador. I might be wrong, but at any rate, so uh, they may want to play, and we certainly can incorporate their design and their we shared the same structural engineer who did the calcs for us as did the calcs for them. So if at that point we could have, we can see whether or not Stephen would like to include those calcs in there. Um, and then, as you probably have noticed, I've been spinning up this low-cost prototype of a wash module that I'd also like to include. So, other than that, I'm just open. I'm also on the hook for getting, as part of our Safari virtual fundraiser, on our team, we used EWB's Classy event management module, and we included the opportunity for people to register for free, hoping that they donate something for four additional supplemental sessions. And one's on dry sanitation, which is basically the talk that I think I shared that I prepared and submitted for, it would have been for the Reno conference. And then one of the sessions kind of dovetails into that and also dovetails into our project completion for this El Lanito water supply project. The virtual background is when we had both teams in the overlapping days together there. So we had 5 UC Berkeley women students with us, as well as the rest of the team. But we are completing that project with ferro cement tank build and tech transfer of ferro cement methodology into the community to make smaller. Our tank is about a 25,000 liter storage tank for the system, but the Ecotech is the contractor we're working with. They're going to also do a capacitation or training to do how to make smaller, like 1,000 liter, 250 gallon niche size tanks that would be useful for rainwater catchment size tanks for households and so forth. And in the spirit of that, I'm offering a ferro cement remote virtual workshop session. And I think I'm going to try, and I'm prototyping in my garage a composting toilet seat out of ferro cement. So,
Okay.
so enough about me yakking. So what would you like to talk about?
So I had a follow-up couple of questions that I sent in my email about that, where I was and whether I think if you go back to my
Yeah,
email.
let me check that. I think I was looking at it before. So let me just check that.
Yes.
Pulling it up right now, Dhumal. It's probably at the end of this. Someplace in here. Let's see.
It should be actually, if you look at the last email that you sent to me at the bottom of that one.
Okay, let me take a look at that. Yeah. Well, of course, I'm seeing all these ones that don't have your questions here, so
Yeah,
I'm
and
almost there. I'm almost here. Let me see here. Let's see. So from you, let me see where this would be then. Let's see.
that email was actually, I think I sent it on April 19th.
Okay, so this is further back then. So let me go back.
But it's at the bottom of the email where you said, "Hey, I forgot. I'm sorry, this email got passed to me."
Okay, bear with me for a second, then I'll try this again and see what we pull up here. Okay, so let's see. Here's the April 19th link. Yeah, okay. So I think let's see. So the questions are, should we separate into two documents, design standards, or keep combined as a design standard and O&M? It doesn't, maybe you have a view about what works best, because I haven't been paying as close attention to the standing committee crowd to see how they're developing content and so forth. The basic thing I would hope for, whether it's in one or two documents, is just kind of have, here's a set of open source information, a resource on dry sanitation. It happens to be present some general notions, and then it presents some use cases, if you will, and then it has a range of options that range from dirt cheap vernacular ones without any engineering. Maybe we say we don't do those because we're engineers without borders, to ones that are show a set of calculations that, while they're country specific for Nicaragua, in the case of these that we've been doing, could show people what you need to consider and how to approach that wherever you are. And likewise, while we're using materials that in some of the cases, like the 111 that we've done in Nicaragua, so far, all of those except the first 10 were basically done with Piedras Canteras, which is maybe other countries have got this quarried indigenous volcanic stone, but it's probably, it would only be similar to that, but it's a very Nicaraguan kind of a material.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were, I don't know, if you were building these in some place in Africa, they might make a brick, or they might make a block, or they might do, some sort of a whatever ways they would choose to it. And then I think the other thing in this low cost wash module is looking for ways to really use found materials, because much as we might not like to have it be the case, 5-gallon pails of plastic and polyethylene drums in 30 or 55-gallon sizes are ubiquitous now. They're part of the plastic waste stream that is used initially as a source material to, whether it's cooking oil or whatever it was that was delivered in that bulk container, now is available in Nicaragua for $20 a piece for a used 55-gallon drum, right? So, and in that low-cost wash module, the notion is, can we just have an almost all-at-grade structure using those kinds of composting vessels and using them where appropriate for rainwater catchment, and then really minimize the structural cost. We really only want a modesty site screen, and we want something that will support rainwater collection. So that's yet another take on it versus the other more classical dual vault things, where the first 10 that the EWB chapter did before I was involved, these were concrete masonry unit all the way to the roof. They would have made great little hurricane shelters, very robust, lots of rebar, all that kind of stuff. But the locals themselves turned around, and when we checked back, when I got involved, and we checked back to see how these were doing in about 2013, so that's 3 years or so worth of use on that, they said, oh, they're working great, but we thought we came up with our own cheap version. So that's the one that they did with it was just vernacular. They built it out of Piedras Canteras, no rebar. They just made the vaults out of that, and then they did a real lightweight little casita house on top. None of it engineered. Our structural guys looked at it and said, we can't even find the load path through this thing. We got to do something different. But we came up with the model that we deployed 87 of in the last global grant that was funded by Rotary, and that passed a set of calcs. We treated it, even though we did this under a different methodology in EWB than going through the traditional ICP process. We did it under Engineering Services Corps. At that time, Appropriate Technology Design Team was actually embraced, had been elevated from San Francisco professionals up to headquarters, and even had a web page presence as part of Engineering Services Corps. That's subsequently fallen away. And so an Engineering Services Corps model is really not that kind of project. Theirs is more, can we do something at scale? Can we do a countrywide project providing owner services to a regional entity or a big NGO? can we get paid for it and have EWB, get a revenue stream off of it to at least support the volunteers that we're engaging there. But nonetheless, at least when I last checked in, we have the authority to use that form of EWB, that mode of EWB execution, and just pay the required services that EWB needs, whether there's something they need to review or if there's anything else they need to do. So I don't know if you've done any engineering services corps work or been exposed to them, but it's a different model. And they may have changed the tools they were working with, but at the time, Kevin Hagen, who now I think is still working in engineering services corps, but he was the lead at the time. I think these days he's been doing IKEA-based climate reduction microgrid arrays, like for refugee camps and things like that. But we got an okay from Mike Paddock and Kevin Andrzejewski, who heads that we could, because we're not doing a lot of these ATD type or R&D group projects, if one pops up and we want to use that methodology, what it really offers you is a graded risk approach to doing things. You do the right thing, you demonstrate you're doing the right thing, but you use a different model counting on the maturity of the volunteers who are engaged in it, and you're not having to use the same cookie cutter you use when you're trying to coach student chapters to execute work and get them through a review process. As Kevin once put it, just imagine if you were trying to run your own engineering firm and you had a constantly revolving set of very young, changing engineers. You better have a pretty good quality process on that, or you're not going to get good results. And EWB has to protect the brand, and they have to make sure that the young engineers, even if they're young professionals, they may not, they're not the same as when you're working with a Mike Paddock or a Kevin Hagen or a Larry Bentley or one of those guys who is working, they're just a very seasoned, very mature engineer. And so they'll look at the risk matrix and say, okay, for this project, there's hardly any risk at all. Coyle, you're doing composting latrines, nobody's going to get hurt in the structures you're designing. That's quite different than if we're doing a major hydro project or a major bridge where you have structural issues, you have life safety issues if the bridge collapses, if the dam collapses, et cetera. And so but whichever way it is on the risk matrix, you'll just do the right thing and you'll document the engineering results, the engineering calcs, you'll get the appropriate reviews and you'll proceed. So I digress only to say that's why we, when we did the 87 composting latrines, we got one of the West Coast, at the time, they were just transitioning from doing reviews, ICP reviews, using the TACs with actual live meetings in a go-to-meeting setting with West Coast TAC reviewers. We got one of those West Coast structural reviewers to review our calcs and suggest some modifications. And so we had a set of calcs that would have passed. We argued nobody forced us to do this review, but we did it and it would have passed muster using the typical TAC review.
So your goal is to have this as a design guide that can be used by chapters.
I think it could be used by chapters, or the guy that we worked with from Alcanza, Nicaragua, used to call it barefoot engineers without degrees, which is a little different. There you're providing them with kind of a handbook that isn't necessarily something, like if they were in Nicaragua, they could say, okay, we see how you did this. We don't need to have engineers design it. These are robust, pre-engineered approaches that could be used as is to build more of these without any engineering support even.
So in that sense, I guess back to my email, I see, yes, we can use the LDMON documents as a guide, but I do have a question about the sizing of you have those documents seem focused on the actual construction, right?
Right.
So the sizing of the latrines, the recommended use of the compost, should we add sections on those?
I think those are very appropriate to do. And what I would say, there is a little bit of information in the appendices and references, not appendices, but the references which are included in that document.
Okay.
A lot of that stuff was lifted from a very nice document which some colleagues of mine from Public Laboratory out of Portland put together for the City of Portland's emergency response program. And so this postulated a large seismic event that knocked out the sewer system, and it was patterned after what they did at the New Zealand, is it Church? I forget the name.
Christchurch.
Yeah, Christchurch, where they used it. And so it was basically a 5-pail based approach, but there's no reason. It has a lot of references to more extensive materials, and in at various times along the way, I reviewed as uh, uh, an ICP reviewer, or before that, a TAC reviewer, projects where people were doing a conventional dual vault kind of a latrine project for a school, and how do you address the sizing and how do you get that right. Um, that's one thing that the cartridge-based solutions are very nice for, because then you don't have the unfortunate problem you have if you get it wrong and you have too many people using a classic dual vault unit, and they fill up the first one, they fill up the second one too fast, and now you have not had adequate time for the first vessel to compost properly. Soil in Haiti ran into that when they tried to use these, and that prompted them to go to the cartridge-based system for the public latrines they did with Oxfam, and the ones that they use now in their whole household system, which are basically 5-gallon pail like kind of sized units. So you just swap out a fresh cartridge for a full one, and you compost it off site. Or off-site, in the case of a household unit, could simply be you just shift it to the back of the yard and keep it dry and make sure it has ample time to compost, but you never run out of capacity.
And should we give directions on that, the composting portion as well?
Sure, I think that's a good, yeah, because that's a key thing for improving, because what you really are trying to do is solve a problem, the
Yeah.
problem of poor sanitation from pit latrines that aren't working very well. And in the ones in Nicaragua, what we experienced there in El Niñito and in Los Alvarez before, was these are steep rocky hillsides. They get a lot of rain in the rainy season. The pit latrines overflow, and raw sewage runs down the hill, contaminating everything downhill from it, right? People get sick from it. If people are using shallow wells, there are a few in some of those communities they're using, so it can contaminate those. The other problem then is the pit fills up. It doesn't compost. It's nasty to go in there. I don't know if you've been in one of those kind of latrines, but they're nasty to use. And then they cave in.
Yeah.
So they're a hazard from that. And then you have to also dig a replacement. So, I was talking with a person who around Lake Atitlan was in Guatemala, was saying, there are households here that their whole backyards are honeycombed with, you know, with
Failed
pit.
latrines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no place to either, and every one of them's a cost. So if you get them an at-grade solution, so the material is above ground, it doesn't contaminate the water, either the dual vault units, or if you choose the cartridge-based units, you've just got an option that doesn't, that is, if you can keep it cheap enough so that it's competitive with building a conventional pit latrine, and you throw in any kind of life cycle cost element to it at all, they're not going to have to dig another pit latrine for the rest of their lives. And the pit latrines, the dual vault ones that we did, they'll be good for decades. Those vaults are going to be there for a long time. The ones that were done in 2010, which were done granted out of CMUs and rebar, those were still doing fine when I was there in 2019. The ones that we did in 2014 were still doing fine, and they were
So are you separating you're separating the urine?
yes, these have got
Yes,
what's
that's
called
right.
a urine diverting
UD.
toilet seat. So there's a little shelf or ledge, and so in those, that's just built into the toilet seat, which typically in the communities we're working with, they're low density populations, so they can just route that out to a French drain
Yeah.
and be done with it. The urine's sterile from healthy people; it's not a problem.
Yeah.
I ran into a case when we visited an alternative scheme at Lake Atitlan. This is a group that doesn't do composting; they instead do pyrolysis on the feces. But they are in very, very dense hillside communities around Lake Atitlan, and there are some in the dry sanitation briefing. I think I sent a link to. They've got a little video or some, there's a picture in there that shows it. If you tried to just take care of the urine that way, there's really no place for it to go. It'd be like dumping it in your, on the sidewalk, or a completely paved
Yeah.
sidewalk kind of a thing. It's like, it would be like if you were in Cinque Terre in Italy or something, and you were seeing those hillside communities where there's nothing, there is no bare land. It's all just an equivalent of paths, paved or cobblestone paths and stuff. So you got to then disposition the urine appropriately. And so they were collecting it. And in the case it's Mosan is the name of and I would not call them a nonprofit. I would call them a social entrepreneur kind of an organization. But they are actually taking and extracting the useful nutrients out of the urine and offering that as an agricultural byproduct that could be used. They're turning the feces into biochar, and then they're producing an effluent stream in the water that is treatable and suitable for release.
Yeah. So back to this document.
Yep.
I'm looking through those questions again. So I think it doesn't make it, as long as we differentiate what portions are design standards and what portion is the O&M portion, that we can keep it as a separate.
Yeah. And I think these items, I think it's important to address sizing.
Yes.
And I think, the methods of calculating accurate volume of waste that accounts for waste shrinkage. I've seen the literature's got information on this that we can turn to.
Put that part of the design guide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then same for the guidelines for composting, give them some information.
Yeah.
Question number 5. I know there was a table of costs from Le Mans.
I wouldn't use El Limon's. El Limon's, their units, for example, the last cost that we had for the ones we did where we built 87, we had bill of materials that came in at $415 a unit. I think El Limon's bill of materials was about $1,500 a pop.
Okay.
And now I expect that given what's happened in Nicaragua since the 2014 build, that the cost of that bill of material, if we just did the baseline we've been doing. So this is the one which has it has been engineered. It's still Piedras Canteras for the vaults primarily, but at the corners it has CMU with rebar. Yeah. It has a thicker slab and more developed length in the rebar that ties into the slab. And then it has an engineered nailing strip such that because that vault is still not as strong as you would like it to be, and you do a worst case scenario and said, what if the little structure on top could transmit all the wind loading forces into the base? It could be damaging to the vault. Well, it can't do that anyway, but we just said, okay, we'll put in an engineered nail strip. So if those winds get too high, the little structure will just gracefully, the nails will pull out, it'll fail gracefully, you can repair it. Yeah. So that one, if we were to cost it out, it might cost more than $415 based on inflation or based on what's happened with the pandemic, with the civil unrest. I don't know what that will be, but my hunch is that the cartridge-based, the 55-gallon poly-based one has a chance of being cheaper. So
how can I get those costs for the cartridge-based?
We can get our on-the-ground people in Nicaragua. The combination of Alcanza Nicaragua, which will be the party that they're the NGO we've worked with since the beginning, both for the first round of composting latrines in 2010, the round of 87, and then we're also working with them on our water supply project, and we have approved funding for another about 80, and they are the in Rotary Global Grants, there's a term of art called the cooperating organization, and they're the approved cooperating organization. While Engineers Without Borders is not formally involved in that, we can get informal support from the Nicaragua country office. Francisco Lopez, for example, I talked with him on the phone and he said, yeah, those poly drums are about 20 bucks a pop used, and he's the guy who has done our remote implementation procurements and buys for us. And so he works for Adrufo Rodriguez, and we could check with Adrufo and we could figure out if we could just pay him for their help and get help on costing or procurements or whatever.
So can you help me get
yes
with him? Okay.
Yeah.
And then
where I'm at with that is the prototype that I have, I've not yet got it modeled up.
Okay.
That's the cartridge base one. I prototyped it in the yard using, I don't know if you looked at that, but it basically fits in an 8x16 grid if you want to, and it would fit within that. It could be smaller depending on how much functionality you want to add to it. But it has three 55-gallon poly drums for the composting vaults. It has three poly drums for rainwater catchment. It has a lightweight structure that goes up to basically house that and provide a rainwater catchment roof. And so those elements would need to be costed, but I haven't moved it from just me having some poles stuck in a weighted 5-gallon pail to hold the mock-up members up and lay some sheets of corrugated roofing material up there.
Mhm.
And it needs to be engineered.
Yeah.
Would need to be fleshed out a little bit to jot down a bill of materials and then get the people there to cost it.
Okay. But and the documents, like the other documents, the other design I saw was from the San Francisco Libre in Nicaragua that you had in
Uh,
the Google Drive as well. You
yeah,
had a
let's see. We probably had I'd have to look in that list of things because I think I had some information from the University of Las Vegas and the Las Vegas professionals who had done a classic set of dual vault units in Nicaragua. There were
Yeah,
some
that's the
design documents there.
UNLV
Yeah,
as built I'm looking at.
yeah. So there's that. I think there might have I have a briefing on this where we actually the San Francisco professionals put in a set of these kind of composting latrines at the Bayonnaise, Haiti medical facility where they're now having to close that project out after it's been running since about 2005. It was going when I first joined EWB, but EWB doesn't want to work in Haiti anymore. But we can find examples, and I think we should limit the scope to the examples, the use cases that we have ready access to, which are in Nicaragua,
Okay.
and then just make sure that it's clear if people look at it that this is a use case based in Nicaragua. So there are things you can see about how we did the calcs, you can see things about the materials we chose, but the actual case you'll do in your country, wherever, you'll need
Yeah.
to use the appropriate design requirements for that location.
Okay. Okay. I think I've got some of my questions answered. So let me dive back into that.
Well, thank you so much, and
Okay.
thanks. I really appreciate you weighing in on this and leaning into it because I think we can have some fun with it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I hope so too. So
yeah.
yeah,
Remind me where you're physically based,
San
Dhumal.
Francisco.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, we're wrapping up the formal part of it, but I lucked into finding out that Manu Prakesh's lab at Stanford, Manu decided after years of thinking about it, decided with about 2 weeks notice to conduct what he's just wrapping up the formal segments of. They've been twice a week Zoom sessions in a course called Frugal Science.
Okay.
And in Frugal Science, the main idea was, I don't know, are you familiar with Manu Prakesh's lab at Stanford?
No, I'm not.
It's worth Googling to see. I don't know if I've got one handy here. I probably.
How do you spell the name again? I'm sorry.
It's Prakash, Prakash. And he was a MacArthur Fellow, been at Harvard, been at MIT, now at Stanford. And in all fullness of disclaimer, my son completed his second postdoc in Manu's lab and really benefited enormously from it. But in this class, while I didn't get some of the first thing was to come up with ideas for problems that we thought had global impact and that were in the spirit of frugal science. And one of the ones that he's famous for is for co-inventing the fold scope microscope, which is a microscope you can basically produce for under $1
Oh, wow.
and get like on the order of 140x magnification. Well, now you can buy fold scopes at anywhere from $9 to you get a deluxe kit like I just did for $20 or $30, which underwrites now the over of these fold scopes that they've pushed out into the world and now have got a fabulous user community of people who do fold scopes and a lot of students. He's got this great joke. I should find my fold scope and show it to you. Just let me look around for a second. It'll just take a minute. this box just came a day or two ago. I had offered one of these as a virtual auction item for the Safari benefit, the fundraiser that we did for the chapter. So let me open it up and I'll show you. This one actually is not a bad one to look at. It's not assembled, but I also bought, and just don't see it at my fingertips, a one that is pre-assembled, so you don't have to spend the time assembling it. But Phil Bowman from who's the REIC on our water supply project, and I masked up, we went over to his house, and he assembled one of the fold scope kits. So this, let me see, this is the unboxing video, right? So let me turn off my virtual background so you can see it a little better. So here is the deluxe fold scope kit in this package that it comes in.
Mhm.
And in this package, what we're going to find, oh, it's taped closed. That's a convenient thing to avoid the contents getting spilled out. But while I'm talking about this, I digress. The main thing they did is they had people focus on problems of interest. So I went ahead and created a Discord presence and did a Notion page around this wash module, just stating the basic problem about, anywhere from 2.5 to 4 billion people don't have adequate access to sanitation. And so what are low cost ways to address that? And he's all about, as you're trying to do this frugal science, looking for ways that from the beginning, you think about how you can make it scale and make it have the potential to, like the fold scope, where you can go to millions of these things being in the world. So it's got a bunch of kit in here for sample prep and for producing, I see a lot of accessories in there. And then it's got, this is the fold scope as it comes as a set of die cut paper, and you go through a process of steps to punch these things out and assemble it, and then you have and put the lens in it, and then you have this little paper microscope, which is when you get to, that's the other thing, you could just look at foldscope.org, I suspect is what it is. Let me see what it says. Or if you just Google foldscopes, you'll find their site. But it has been fascinating to watch that. And he had, I think at the first Zoom call, the kickoff for it, I think they had 500 plus people on the Zoom call. And then I think they had on order 700 people on the Discord channel. And these were like you'd have Zoom sessions with people at 2:58 in the morning in India participating in the call and stuff. And so it was very interesting. And then they basically had people, some of the teams had coaching sessions. They had Manu called in all these chits. And so he had scores of, or at least a dozen very, very interesting mentors who volunteered their time, and they would support the teams. And so you had people working on just a raft of things, home oncology kits, everything under the sun, looking for these kinds of things, but with a big chunk of time up front spent on trying to define what the problem is. And so I just found it very interesting and instructive. So I'm going to go ahead and follow through with using that Notion page as one way and one place to document the work on this inexpensive wash module.
Okay.
Now we may choose to say, I think I also started a GitHub thing for a location where one could put like the CAD drawings for it or whatnot. So, but I'm hanging on by my fingernails. I got too much stuff going on.
Yeah.
At any rate.
But okay, let me jump back in and give me a few weeks and I'll probably tap you again.
That sounds terrific. And I've got to tell you, I really thank you. And I'll keep you posted on the progress I'm making. For example, I got a partial mock-up of this ferro cement toilet seat sitting inside a 5-gallon pail. It's modeled after a workshop I've done a lot of times where there's no ferro cement involved. It's just using this Portland 21st century catastrophe or sanitation for the 21st century. I forget what it's called, but it's the 5-gallon pail based composting emergency response kind of a solution. And I think that the notion of being able, since I'm going to do it anyway as part of I've already, if you will, had some people register for this virtual session. I need to get a little simple workshop that I can conduct. It would be like an Instructables sort of a thing on here's how you can do this.
Yeah.
Here, it's one example of why ferrocement is a cool technology. We're using this in Nicaragua to do household water supply tanks as part of a tech transfer thing, and a big tank for our water supply system. The NGO there actually uses, they do composting latrines as well, but they make kind of a fancy mold and then make a concrete kind of it looks like a modern toilet, except it's made out of concrete and it's got the urine diverting lip. And then they situate it in what amounts to a dual vault kind of a setup. Whereas in Haiti, Soil, the nonprofit, tends to use a similar looking thing, but they use them in households. And so they're inside a house, and then they have a service. So an attendant brings a fresh container, takes the other one brings fresh composting material, and that's their model.
Okay.
So, well, hey, it's been terrific to put a name and face to it. And
Yes,
thank you so
I
much for
have come for
leading
some of
us.
the SF professional meetings,
Great.
but I haven't really come and talked to you. I've seen you there.
Oh,
But,
good. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much. It's
No
always
problem.
good. And thank you for the other work you're doing with, with the rest of EWB. It's delightful to see how people can connect and make a difference. And so that's good.
Yeah. No, it's a good organization, so I plan to continue to be involved with them. So
All right. Thanks. Be well. Stay safe.
thanks. You too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.